Hello, hello, hello. I am Dr. Ian and I am so excited to welcome you to the Self Talk Show. And you know what the Self Talk Show is an experience for you to renew your mind, to rewire your brain, and to ultimately reinvent your life. I am extremely excited to welcome a really good friend of mine. I know person may say he is a special guest, but he is more than a special guest. He is a special friend of mine. So this evening on the Self Talk Show, I'm so delighted to welcome Paul. Give us a wave to let us all know that you are alive and well here on the Self Talk Show.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.
Excellent. And just a quick bio, a very brief bio about Paul. Paul is a cognitive behavioral therapist. He's also with the Da Vinci Wellness Center here in the Cayman Islands. He is also the author of two books, Being Magnified and Dominion. So, Paul, welcome again to the Self Talk Show. And I am so delighted that we are going to be having a brief 15-minute conversation on three important points to remember about self-talk. Three important points to remember about self-talk. But Paul, before we go into this topic, I just want you to say just a quick few seconds about your two books. Just tell the audience quickly about your two books, and then we will go into the session this evening. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I wrote two books, Self Dominion and Magnified. And so those two books are self-help books that will help people to take better control of their lives, just through a self-help way.
Excellent. And I know lots of persons, I know their lives are still being improved by your two books. So today, Paul, as we focus here on the self-talk show on three important points to remember about self-talk, three important points to remember about self-talk. I know we are going to be doing this quickly, but I know that we have lots of information to share. So as we speak and share here on the self-talk show, I want you to first explain to us how beneficial is self-talk. And once again, we are here being featured with Mr. Paul Challenger, a cognitive behavioral therapist, and we are here on the self-talk show. So Paul, how beneficial is self-talk?
Okay. So we all need self-talk. Self-talk helps to guide us to our goals. It helps us understand where we are with our feelings about certain things. And so, as a cognitive behavioral therapist, I help my clients untangle their thoughts, their feelings, and the behaviors that come with it. So, self talk is the commentator within each of us. It is whatever we want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps the friend or the enemy. But whatever we're thinking of, it is something within our minds that we're either encouraging or or we're trying to resist.
Excellent. That has been extremely powerful there with you, Paul. And I always say in terms of the aspect of what self-talk is, it's actually changing your negative, old, non-productive messages, habits, and behaviors into a more positive, influential habits and behavior. And I want to say that self-talk has been changing millions of lives globally. And what it
Yes.
is a privilege again to have a certified behavioral, a cognitive behavioral therapist in the person of Paul Challenger here on the Self-Talk Show. So there's a second question that I have here for you, Mr. Paul. And first, we just dealt with how beneficial is self-talk. So I'm coming right into your space now. Paul, tell us now how beneficial is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is also known as CBT. How beneficial is cognitive behavioral therapy?
It is. quite useful. So when we think about the cognitive behavioral therapy, we're thinking about the cognitive thinking aspect of our minds and our feelings that goes along with it. um, Behavioral, that's the behavior that we do when we think and we feel, then we behave, of course. Therapy comes in when we look for techniques and to break these down and to help the individual to come up with solutions to help them get by. It is beneficial in many ways. It helps to eliminate the blame we put on other people and ourselves. It helps to us take back control of ourselves. It also helps us resolve confusion within our minds. And this is beneficial because it also helps us to identify the problems and solutions that comes with it.
Excellent. That's extremely important. And the last question here I have for you, Paul, is where do negative thoughts come from? And we know that we live in a world, and based on my studies in the area of neurocoaching, also my studies in the area of self-taught, we've been told that at least 77%, and we know it's more than that, but we often say between 77% and 90% programs and the messages which we receive literally from the moment we were born. And we know that those messages were imprinted at a subconscious level between the ages of 0 and 7. So we know that loads of messages that we receive were actually negative messages, messages which we receive not due to any fault of their own, but from parents, adults, those with some form of influence over our lives. But tell us, Paul, from your experience, your studies, your knowledge, where do negative thoughts come from?
All right, well, it doesn't come from any particular space, but um, our situations, our situations causes us to either think well or we think ill, and so um, our negative thoughts come from our doubt. You know, the fear we have within ourselves, the inability to have a vision for the future, the lack of creativity that we all possess, the ability to be creative, to think outside the box. But sometimes we're stuck, and because of fear, we sometimes don't allow our minds to process and to bring um, into our consciousness the ideas that could help us to get through. Sometimes we shut off our minds before we even get the ideas we need. If you ask yourself a question, sometimes it takes a while for our minds to give us the answer, and so sometimes we block those emotions, we block those feelings, we block those thoughts from even entering, and so we end up thinking negatively.
Well, that's very powerful, Paul. And before we wrap up here on the self talk show, I just want to greet some person that I'm seeing here that would have made some comments. I want to greet Gita, Janet. I also want to greet Pastor Sophie and also Angela. I see Angela is here, and Sabita, and also Patrina. So to you wonderful folks, I want to greet you here again on the Self Talk Show. We are in the amazing company of the distinguished Paul Challenger, who is a cognitive behavioral therapist. So before we spoke on how beneficial is self-talk, we also spoke on how beneficial is cognitive behavioral therapy. We also just shared on where do negative thoughts come from. And Paul, the icing on the cake is how can we use self-talk to become a better person? How can Ian Levine use self-talk to become a better person? How can you use self-talk to become a better person? And how can all of our Facebook celebrities, all those here on Facebook with us, how can they are on YouTube, because remember we are on Facebook and on YouTube. So how can these amazing persons use self-talk to become a better person?
Okay, so that's a very good question. Okay, So first of all, we want to have the right affirmations. We want to be able to envision our goals, envision our outcomes, and allow our words, our thoughts to match up with them. Sometimes we tend to just um, believe that our lives is on automatic, and it's not. We also are responsible for our thoughts, because our thoughts are wrapped around our dreams, our goals, our ideas. So we use affirmation. We structure and design our thoughts purposefully, and we must envision only the desired outcome. I also have those three important those points that I want to also to mention before I go,
Yes, sir.
if we have time. Okay, so we also one, whatever you say to yourself in the comforts of your own mind, that is what you become. You see,
Excellent.
because your thoughts influence how you feel, and the way you act based um, on your thoughts. So we have to make sure that our mind is aligned with what we really want and not those things we don't. And the second one is the meditation of your heart works closely with your words and your actions.
Wow.
Um, they're not separate, So your heart is listening in a way to your thoughts and to your feelings. And
Yes.
and and so we have to ensure that what we're thinking of repeatedly is working in accordance with our goals.
Yes.
And if we're not aligned. The third one is, if I tell you something, you might doubt it. But if you tell yourself the same thing, especially with conviction, you most likely will believe it to be your truth. So no matter how much I tell you, good job, you're doing well,
Yes.
do it this way, until you begin to say to yourself, it's only it's a lie.
Yes.
Anything that someone says to us it doesn't add up or match up to um, where we're going, but because it must come from within our own selves.
Yes, sir. And Paul, thank you for being here on the Self Talk Show. I know that you had this plan for several weeks now, and just a couple days ago, you reached out and said, you know what, Ian, I'm ready to come on the Self Talk Show. We never had a real deep discussion prior to the show, but you just made a critical highlight where you said about the words we speak are the most important words. And often here on the Self Talk Show, I always want to remind our Facebook and YouTube audience that the most important words in the world are the words which you say when you talk to yourself. And I see a comment here. There are lots of comments here coming in from all the wonderful persons here on the chat right here. And Janet, she said, my chief takeaway is envision the desired outcome. Envision the desired outcome. And I know that, and often also Pastor Sophie also said that envision the right outcome and allow our words and thoughts to be purposeful. We can go on and
Yes.
on and on, but we know the Self Talk Show is a mere 15 minutes. And probably fortunately or unfortunately, our time is up. But Paul, today has been very beneficial. Obviously, this is not your last time you will be back on again as we go into more stuff dealing with our brain and our mind and the whole aspect of cognitive behavioral therapy. But before you go, as you were speaking about thoughts, and I think this is something I will want to do sometime in the future here on the Self Talk Show, to let our audience have a clearer understanding what thoughts are. Thoughts are things, they are chemical reactions,
Yes.
electrical impulses,
Yes.
chemical, the electrical impulses. They are things.
Yes.
They are
Yes.
thoughts are tangible,
Yes.
and
Yes.
neurons. So
Yes. Thoughts are
neurons,
things.
neurons, electrical impulses, and chemicals. Thoughts are
Yes,
things.
absolutely.
So Paul, any closing comments from you before we sign off here on the Self Talk Show?
Yes, yes. Always be vigilant of your mind. Always be aware of what you think. Your mind is either working for or against you. So ensure that everything that you're thinking of aligns with your goals.
Excellent. So brilliant. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we want to thank you for being here with us on the Self Taught Show. I will also want to thank your wonderful comments. There are so many comments that it would take maybe 50 million years to read all the amazing comments. But I want to thank all of you for being here. Paul, you have been absolutely amazing. You are indeed the star of the show. So, once again, this is the Self Taught Show, and experience for you to renew your mind, rewire your brain, and to ultimately reinvent your life. I am Dr. Ian, and that is the amazing, handsome Paul Challenger, the cognitive behavioral therapy. Our time is up. We thank you for your time. See you next week, same time, same place,
Thank you.
right here on the Self Talk Show. Good night, and
Thank
God
you.
bless you. Thank you,
Good
Paul.
night, guys.
Wave our people, let them know that you're still alive and well.
Thank you. Take care. Have a good night.
Good
All
night.
right.
And I also want to thank my host right there, Pastor Brian Calendar, for facilitating this live for me. Thank you. God bless you.